We shall now talk about the system software called as the preprocessor. This is a really important software when you're learning C programming because you need to understand what all the preprocessor does and how to use the preprocessor smartly so that you can write more effective and efficient code. So the first thing is a preprocessor is a software code or a software program. As the name indicates, it comes into picture or it works on your source program before the actual compiler takes over your source program. So it does a certain amount of pre-processing on your code before the compiler can work on it. The first job which is commonly understood or what the preprocessor does is, suppose you got a statement called as hash include stdio.h. So at that point where it encounters that statement, it copies and pastes the header file into that particular location. Technically, it is known as it includes the header file at that particular location. Next important task. We have written a number of comments in our prior program. Comments are meant for people like me and you to understand the program when we come back to the code after a few days. Comments have got really no use in the program because comments cannot be converted into a machine language because comments are merely information for maintaining and understanding the code. So the preprocessor removes any comments in the source program. Then it does one more important task called as the macro substitution. In order to understand what is a macro, let's take an example of a program. Suppose I want to find the area of a circle. The formula for area of a circle is pi r square. So what I can do is at the very top, I can say hash define pi 3.142. So wherever I use pi in my program, it is going to search and replace pi with 3.142. So pi is an example of a very simple macro because it is a symbol which is substituted with 3.142. Now what it means is, using hash define, you can write some piece of code here, you can write some symbol name here and then followed by that write some piece of code. So wherever that symbol occurs, it will be replaced with a piece of code. That piece of code is known as a macro substitution. Macro means a small shortcut code is replaced with the actual code. So let us say pi is a symbol or it represents the key or it represents that shortcut to that code. So wherever pi occurs, it may replace it with some particular code. So this is another example of what the preprocessor does. Then there is one more important task the preprocessor does, which you will learn as and when we do a detailed session about the use of the preprocessor. So let us understand what do you mean by this conditional compilation. Suppose I have written a piece of code, okay, and that piece of code requires to be compiled differently on Windows, differently on Linux, differently on Apple Macintosh, differently on Unix. So what I do is, in my code, I define something like this. I say OS1 represents Windows, OS2 represents Apple, OS3 represents Linux. So when I send my source code to the preprocessor, this particular OS1, OS2 or OS3 will get activated or will get a value based on the operating system I am working on. Assume I am working on Windows, then if I write this statement, if the operating system is Windows, some code which is required for the program to compile on Windows is passed on to the compiler and this indicates the end of it. Let me clear it at a conceptual level. Please do not try to understand the syntax because the syntax and things are not important. The concept is important. What I mean by conditional compiling is some code is unique to the operating system you are working on. So you need to send only that code to the compiler because C may have certain restrictions that the code works differently on Windows, the code works differently on Linux, the code works differently on Unix. So it says based on the operating system, only include that part of the code as a part of your program and send it to the C compiler. So assume I am on Windows. What will the preprocessor do is it will only include that part of the code which is for Windows and send it to the compiler. It will not include code which is relevant for the Apple, Linux and Unix. It will ignore that. So this is what you mean by conditional compiling. That means you send code which is required for that particular operating system. I can give you another example of conditional code. Say for example, my software program is being used in different Indian languages. So here I can say, if def language is say Hindi, the code is different. If the language is say Marathi, the code is different. If the language is Bhojpuri, the code is different. So based on the language the user selects or the user wants to use, that particular code will get compiled. That's what you mean by conditional compilation. In the next video or after that, I will take a source program. That means I'll take a program like helloworld.c or some small program, and I will show you when I run that program through the preprocessor how the output looks. After the preprocessor, when the output is sent to the compiler, how the output looks. From the compiler, when it is sent to the assembler, how the output looks. So we'll take a journey of the C program, starting from when you type it, save it, till it gets converted into an executable or till it gets into a file which can be run on your PC.